We want to dedicate this episode of Legends of Iron to Coleen Poundstone, Derek Poundstone's mother. Unfortunately, she passed away January 7th, 2022. Derek's father instilled work ethic in him, but it was Coleen who taught him to dream big, supported him, and always was his biggest fan. Derek loved his mother very much, and we're very sad to hear of her passing.
Derek, it's very tough losing a loved one, especially your mom. I'm very close with my mom also, so I can only understand what you're going through. And, rest in peace and stay strong, brother.
Hey, Derek. I loved your mom. Coleen was a wonderful person. She was sweet. She was loving. She was caring. She's everything a mother should be. And I am so sorry for your loss. And you're in our thoughts and prayers, and all my love goes out to you and the family, brother.
Yeah, Derek, I remember meeting her on multiple accounts, and she was a sweet lady, always smile on her face. It was always great to see her. And, I have a really close relationship with my mother, so I can only imagine what you're going through right now. I'm sending my love, brother, sending positive vibes. As I told you in a text, anything I can do for you, I'm here. But more importantly, we're dedicating this episode to your mother, Coleen Poundstone.
Welcome to the Legends of Iron. I'm John Anderson. Meet my co-hosts, Nick Best and Akeem Williams. We're going to have some amazing guests on the show. Buckle up tight, because we're going to be talking about the shit you're not supposed to be talking about. We're going to be discussing anything and everything it takes to become a Legend of Iron.
Legends of Iron is brought to you by Musclemen's, the creator of Nitro Test. Nitro Test is hands down the most fucking kick-ass pre-workout on the market. The question is, can you fucking handle it?
Welcome to another edition of Legends of Iron. I'm John Anderson. With me always, my partners in crime, Nick Best. Unfortunately, Akeem Williams is not able to be here today, but we have got a killer guest for you, let me tell you. This guy is something else. He ruled the roost in an era of strongman where there was two guys that were just about unbeatable. He's one of the few men that had ever beat Zydrunas Savickas and Mariusz Pudzianowski. Very, very small list of people who beat those two. And we've got one of them sitting right here with us on the show. He trained hard, competed harder. This man is an absolute fucking savage. And let me tell you, I've seen a lot of tough dudes, a lot of strong dudes, but Derek Poundstone, you take the cake. Welcome to the show, my brother. How are you?
I was wondering, I thought there was two guests on for a second. I'm like, who's this champ? I want to meet him. That means a lot coming from you, John. You're a pretty insane athlete, competitor yourself. So, I mean, it's definitely, it definitely means a lot. I appreciate the invite to come on the show with you and Nick, and always willing to accommodate you guys.
Well, thank you.
Well, thanks, bud.
Yeah,
that's really cool. It's good to see your face, dude. It's been too long, way too long.
Yeah, isn't that the truth, man? Holy shit. Well, back what I was saying about being a savage, I remember firsthand because, when some of those team competitions, we were actually together, and so I was having to, you were just coming in, I was having to keep up with your ass. It was, it was pretty crazy, and then, somewhere in that, 2006, 7, you just put it all together and just started. I mean, you turned it on so strong, nobody could slow you down. And you gained such a head of steam. You started knocking down these big names, started winning huge contests. And it was pretty amazing, brother. I mean, you had an amazing career. You trained through tons of injuries. you competed with many injuries. Most people would never think about competing with some of the stuff that you competed with, which was all very difficult. But one of the things that I'd love for you to talk about, which was probably one of the toughest of all, was, you know, the loss of Mike Jenkins, which was tough for everybody, but I think you especially. We'd love to hear you talk about that, brother.
Well, you know, John, I don't really, first off, I'm not really good with, getting praised. It's just a weird thing. I just always enjoyed, the challenge of being, not of being the best, but, the pursuit of something, and I say something, it doesn't mean strength. I just trying to just figure it out, and that being said, when Mike had passed, at that, it was kind of an eye opener. Not like for me, there's a couple different like things that come into my mind when at that time, and first was I really didn't even like Mike when I first met him. I liked him as a guy, but as a competitor, I was like, he's different than me. He was very, he wore like the pink shoes, the Chucks, and he had the crazy, he had this crazy personality. And I just was like, clean cut guy. I just went out there and just did work, and he made it like look fun, where I made it look like I think watching me was like watching a car accident. You can't look away because you're just waiting for shit to break,
That's where Mike,
true. What I'm saying? Like I like laid it all out. I mean,
oh yeah.
And then
you did do that.
And then
for sure.
Then Mike was just this, he always left a little bit in the tank, and it's crazy because like there's like this like Chinese philosophy Taoism, which it talks about never really giving 100%, because if you do, it takes too much out of you and you don't, you can't recover. And we're talking about like work and life and relationships and just generally everything, and I realized a decade later nearly that that's a kind of like way Mike was. He gave it his all, but he was smart about it, and I wasn't. And then when people want to speculate, no, when I say I was smart, like I killed myself. I mean, I'm all or nothing, and I was 110% in, and I would go until, most people fail. They make the choice. When I say fail, I'm talking like if they're benching or deadlifting, they hit that point where like it's hard and they let go of the bar,
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, and for me, and so they just, it's a conscious decision, and people don't really like to admit it, but it's okay. Where I was able to reach true, failure, like complete and utter, muscular overload. And, that was really good, in the short term, but that's why I was riddled with injuries, because I was always pushing it so far.
Yeah.
And here's Mike, who was so calculated in his training. I was calculated in, really just not necessarily the training aspect, but, every day in the gym was war, but you can't, if you know anything about like, military training, you train the segments and pieces and then you put it together. I was just always just training the whole deal, and so when he passed, it was just it was like shit. I mean, how does that happen? Here's a guy that was ate healthy, trained smart, and had this great personality. He just seemed like he just generally like stuff.
Very likable guy.
Yeah, he wore like life. He wore life itself like a loose garment. You know what I'm saying? Like nothing really seemed to bother him. You know what I'm saying? Like he just looked comfortable out there. And so that's one of the reasons why I retired. Is I just was like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I don't know. Like winning wasn't enough. And it wasn't like I wanted to win more. It's like I win, and I'm happy, and then I'm like, but what am I doing here? So it just was a weird thing. And I kind of struggled with that, in the time he passed, and so I just was like, well, I'm just going to hang it up because I really don't know why I'm doing this, So.
Yeah, I mean, something like that happens, and it can really give you a much different perspective, you know. And you guys were riding the top of the sport, you know. You guys had spent plenty of time together, so I can imagine how that just to give you a new perspective on not only competing but life in general. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, it just changed my perspective, and I just wasn't really willing to, continue to compete. And I think that that's kind of the irony of the whole, athlete mentality is some of the best athletes, aren't really that into it. And not that I wasn't into it. I was into the sport, but it wasn't really winning that made me, that drove me. It was just the experience of just pushing myself and kind of knowing what I was made of. And, it was more of a philosophical way of training versus I want to be big and strong, and I can look back now and identify a lot of those feelings and stuff now at 40, where in my 20s, I had no idea.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, and I've said many times, I learned more about myself in a squat rack, in a long set of squats, than anything else on the planet, because you're finding out what you're made of right then and there. It's like, what can you deal with? What can you handle? What are you willing? What type of pain are you willing to push yourself through? And I know that for you used to make videos and they're titled Pain,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what I identified most with, I mean, you will never experience, the true sort of feeling of being alive until, in my opinion, until you willingly put yourself through, this type of pain that is just different, and I remember doing a deadlift. My back was bothering me whenever it was, 2008 or 9, I think it was 2009. And I was going up to like 750, and which is at that time was, not like I say light, but it wasn't like a not even close to a max effort deadlift. And I just started doing some reps with it, and I was going to do like 5 or 6, and I ended up doing 10 reps, and wasn't really planned. I just was like, my back's bothering me, so I'm just going to see how some reps feel, and then posted a video, and then like next thing you know, it's like it blew up, and then people were saying, oh, the reps were touch and go. So then I put the suit on.
What difference does it make with that kind of weight,
Yeah, like it's like a basketball. Like I'm like, okay, okay, people that deadlift 500 pounds are commenting on it, and that's kind of one thing that I found that's really interesting about, I don't do a lot of these like interviews and podcasts. I don't post a lot of social media content, because if I put my opinion or my idea out there, it's not, no one's asking for it, so if people are, on the internet, and there's no value in it, and not monetary, not like a value for dollar type thing. But if I'm just giving it without them asking, they're just like, they'll just poo-poo on it. Yeah. But when people seek me out, on social, however they, people find me, and then they ask me, then they hang on to the things I'm saying, and they're like, hey, that's awesome. It's so that's why I don't really post much content, because I get asked that a lot, and because, and I learned that with the deadlift videos, everyone's like, oh, he's bouncing the weight. And I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, apparently, 800-pound deadlift for 9, which I did the following week, is shit, because the weight, bounced off the ground, and the weight did all the work, So at that point, I just had to rethink this, and just think to myself, why am I posting stuff like that? Because half the people that watch it and comment really aren't looking to learn something. They're just looking to just be a dick.
I remember I posted a video once. I had squatted 700 pounds for 10. I went down on the 11th. It was one of those sets where you walk it out. You have no intention of putting it away, right?
Yep.
And I'm just getting tore up because a few of the reps weren't down low enough. Well, forgive me. It was a fucking set where I was planning on going to failure, It wasn't a meet, But this was in an era where you were like putting out you were doing a lot of YouTube videos. I mean, now it's real common, but you in the strongman world, you were kind of the leader of putting out this content. People had never seen this stuff before. So, and you got to remember, a lot of times people will say something negative because they're jealous. You know, it's just it's a human instinct. There's people that will support you and people that will throw a turd no matter how good you're doing, you know?
so eloquent. I love.
There's a lot of people out there that actually will make comments without really having any idea. They're just a negative people, Derek. And it's actually a shame that you're going to listen to these people, because what people could actually learn from you is so far greater. I mean, the things I've learned from you and the things I've seen you do personally, I've had to compete head to head with you for several years. And man, I about killed myself just either trying to catch up to you or even catch you in an event. And I mean, we got after it. We had a lot of fun times too. So, I mean, there's certain things I'll never forget. I mean, the plane ride to Korea, I'll never forget that. You know, and Tom and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you know,
think about some of the contests too, Derek. I mean, you're putting up these videos, which is training, but then you're showing up to contests and you're winning by 25 plus points. You know, I mean, what was it? I think it was the 2007 America's Strongest Man. You won by some record number of points. It was like, I mean, I think you could have not done the last event, 2 events, and probably still won. But you were out there kicking ass because that's just the spirit of who you are, you know?
Yeah. You know, and you know, that was, you know, everyone around me at that time was really working on getting bigger and stronger. And I had really honed in on the fact that, you know, knowing the events prior, like, you know, kind of, I saw the moving events and the truck pull, sled drag. I think it was a farmer, then like a truck drag, you know,
Hummer drag,
and then, Hummer drag, Hummer push, and then a chain drag. I was like, ooh,
yeah,
that's insane. I'm like, well, so I need to train like craziness. So I started training like insane long distances, and I was like, well, I'm having a hard time. And as I would drop like 2 or 3 pounds, I noticed my work capacity would increase. So I came in that show purposely about 15 or so pounds lighter, you know, less jacked, you know, like I wasn't as vascular and insane looking. But I was like a workhorse. And, you know, I remember the press, you know, I had trained to do like 15 reps with this 280 pound log. And I remember like people like looking, you know, and like, what in the fuck are you doing? Like after I walked off, you know, and I think I did like 13 reps or something. And I'm like, I know I missed two reps. I knew that I told someone else, I think I maybe told you, Nick, I think your son was there. And I think I remember saying something like, I'm good for 15, you know, and I didn't take into account like all the other stuff prior, you know, and the deadlift, which I at that time I had a pretty bad back still. But the point is, I mean, I definitely, you know, tuned in and honed in on changing myself for the competitions. And that's one of the reasons why I could never win worlds, because I didn't really know how to prepare for worlds, because it really would change too much. Where Arnold, I could do pretty well because I would specifically not train the events, but I just train my body. So it was a little more tuned for maximum output. You know, I really didn't give a shit about recovery. I just want to be able just to, you know, go out there and just lay down some sick numbers. And I would always get hurt at the Arnold, but I trained, you know, so far beyond my capacity that I was able to still perform with some, you know, I suffered a minor bicep tear and, you know, pulled my back a couple, you know, like the erectors. But I knew that was a byproduct of getting that strong. You know, I remember at the gym pulling, you know, 1,100 pound reverse span deadlifts, you know, for 2-3 months, you know, out, you know, and just getting stronger and stronger. So, yeah, it's definitely, and to, you not to take too much time, but Nick, what you're saying too, I don't let the comments necessarily affect me. I just find that if someone happens upon something that I post or whatever, that's good. But when someone seeks it out, and asks, and then I do something like this, it changes it. They take it a little more seriously, and then they'll regurgitate it and put it out there for somebody else. And that's the point. Is I don't want to just put this out there like it's because I think it devalues it a little bit. I don't know. I think I'm having a hard time sort of putting into words, but I just want to be. I'm careful because the audience is. I don't want someone to be like, oh, it's kind of ridiculous. I want to tell somebody something, I like them to be like, okay, and don't necessarily try it, but just think about it for a second, and then go from there, I guess.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Real quick, brother. You said a second. I'm gonna want to take too much time. We're here to listen to you talk, so you take all the time you want to your answers, brother.
So I'm married twice, so I'm not used to that. I'm used to. Are you listening to me?
Well, so what you're talking about, preparing for contests and different training regimens. That's one thing I wanted you to talk about a little bit. And there was a period where you put a lot of time into, getting your heart up to a maximum, capacity, and then timing how quickly it would come back to resting. That was a really, really interesting spin on training. And at that time, you were kind of like breaking new ground. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, John. So back in the my early days of strongman, and when me and you were competing against each other, and also on teams and stuff. One of the things I noticed was I'm like, John is really fucking strong, right? And I look at Nick too, and Z, all these guys are insanely strong, and I'm like, well, I can't beat John at his own game, right? Like the way he presses or the way Nick deadlifts, so I had to find something that was going to be a little different, And so what I did is I said, well, the thing that I'm pretty good at is, I'm able to put myself out there pretty hard, I'm able to give it my all. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to just train my weakness, get my static pressing and deadlifting up, but I also want to work on harnessing my work capacity even more than it already is. And one of the things I had discovered just from reading some articles and whatnot was that the best way to kind of gauge, how do you gauge work capacity, John and Nick? I think about how do I tell, I can use the RPE scale, but that's too subjective. What's an objective way to measure how hard I'm laying it out there, right? I can count reps, but what if, John, like you said, what if 2 or 3 of the reps I'm cutting them a little bit short, right? Let's just say it adds up, but or the tempo is a little faster, right? Now I'm changing it, and so I was timing the sets and saying, okay, well, I'm going to do 10 reps within 45 seconds, but then I'm getting my anxiety levels increasing because now I'm thinking about 45 seconds of a shit show, right? And I'm before I even start the set, I'm already amped up and I'm wasting energy. So I came up with the idea of doing the worst thing you can do. I found that had a decent amount of skill, but a lot of work involved.
This idea of yours was fucking genius, by the way. This idea of yours was absolutely genius. Keep talking about, what you're explaining was so far ahead of what anybody was thinking about at this point,
Well, so the idea though, John, was to take something and not just so. Initially, I started doing something where I'd take a treadmill and I'd push the treadmill when it was off. So it was like a truck push, and I would just try to endure 2 minutes. And then I started doing a little bit of reading about, I found that I was closing my eyes a lot, and I started doing a little reading and finding that closing your eyes changes the way your brain processes information. Now I'm no longer fighting, but now I'm surviving. I don't want to go into a competition trying to survive. I want to fight. So I got to keep my eyes open. But it still wasn't, there wasn't enough specificity in that. I still couldn't really, how many steps was I taking? It was just too hard to duplicate each workout. So what I started doing was doing 300-pound keg carries for fixed distance, because it was just enough skill, right? Because you got to carry it, you got to pick it up, carry it. And I didn't want to load it over a bar, because I didn't want there to be, too high of a chance of dropping it, or, kind of getting a little too excited. So it was a way to kind of make sure that I still had some fine motor skills, and that I had to think about the movement, but it was very painful. Anyone that does keg carries, for time, knows it.
Limiting variables as well, correct? You're limiting some variables.
Yeah, I'm adding just enough variables so I'm able to properly evaluate like the set, if you will, and so instead of looking at how much time it took me to carry the 2 or 3 kegs, what I did is I looked at my overall time doing it. So I would go 100 feet, 3 kegs, 100 feet. And what I found is generally I was right around 50 seconds, which is, it's decent. That was the beginning of my training when I first started doing this. But what was interesting is before I picked up the first keg, before we pressed the start button, I was told to go by my ex-wife, Kristen. What we do is we measure my heart rate. And pre-event, my heart rate was around 120 beats a minute, right? Because I have anxiety. So that was my resting heart rate. That's like you line a car up on the drag strip, right? And you rev it up, right? I'm priming the pumps, right? I'm getting the body's getting ready. So I would do it 50 seconds, right? Give or take. And I don't really care about 2 or 3 seconds. And I was trying to go about 95% there. And I would do this twice, right? Every single week. And what I found is, my time would decrease a little bit, but my main focus was, during the, trying to figure out how my recovery was. So what I found is my recovery, I would get to 180 to 190 beats a minute was my maximal heart rate, during the middle of the set, right? Because my heart monitor would signal how high I would get and when. So what I would do is I found that during the sets, my max heart rate, doing this week in and week out and doing the conditioning that I like to do, which is treadmill pushes and that sort of stuff. I was even running for a bit of time. My max heart rate wouldn't go up to 190. It would only go to about 178. My time would decrease by about 5 or 8 seconds. So I get down like around 40 seconds. But most importantly, John, is it would take me the first time I would do this about 4 or 5 minutes to get to the point where I was recovered. Having done this right before World's Strongest Man 2009, when I was in pretty good shape, my recovery was 30 to 45 seconds. So I went from 5 minutes down to 45 seconds, essentially. Yeah. And that was the measure to figure out if what I was doing during the week was working. And that the thing I was doing was treadmill pushes. So I was doing these 2 sets, 2-minute treadmill pushes. And I would do 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off, and I do that 3 times. And then right before Worlds, like the last couple weeks, I would just do 8 minutes straight of just and forcing my heart rate to stay above 180. So I was in that point, that spot where you want to shit and puke at the same time. And I would endure that.
Hold on, real quick, for people that are listening that don't understand, to have your heart rate that high for a brief period of time feels like you're getting run over by a truck, let alone to leave it there for minutes. How many minutes did you say that you were doing that?
So towards the end, 8 minutes, as I would keep it there. So it's funny because there's a few people that actually witnessed a couple times I did this. There's a female strongwoman competitor, Christina Lafex, and then my ex-wife, and my face, my head would be purple, and the irony is I was able to train so I could endure this low oxygen environment for long periods of time because the blood's moving so fast that the cells aren't able to pull the oxygen out, and that was really one of the reasons why I had to retire because what ended up happening is it just destroyed my body, and I started developing an irregular heartbeat because my pushing my heart that hard for that long. And Nick knows because I called him a few times. I'm like, I have an irregular, and so I don't recommend you do that. But
I don't think most people
So-
could do that.
So now here's the thing, Derek. Here's the thing. I was doing those treadmill pushes after I learned it from you. I wasn't taking it quite to that extreme, because I remember you said you're doing like 3 sets of it, push for 2 minutes and then walk for a minute, push for 2 minutes, walk for a minute, push for 2 minutes. I was getting up to where I could do that like about 7, 8 times. When I was in that range, I knew I was in really good shape, but I didn't push. I took my time. I did that over weeks and weeks and weeks to get up there, but I didn't push it to that quite extreme where it was getting up into the 190s, ish in the heart range stuff. But a lot of those conditioning things that you did 100% work unbelievably. You just took the whole next step further.
Yeah. I mean, that whole, just the fact that this is a principle that you developed on your own so far ahead of the whole strongman community. It's one of the reasons why you were just such a man-eater, man. You had created this. I mean, you were in such good shape, obviously extremely strong, but you had the ability to recover. You walk away from something, people laying on the ground,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that culminated in 2008 when I competed at Madison Square Garden. There was like no time between the events, and that was the type of competition that I was best suited for, because guys, I remember Travis was puking in the butt in the garbage can backstage, and Marius was supposed to compete there, and I was training because I knew that Madison Square Garden, it's a union outfit, right? So I knew that they had to really keep the time crunched. They had to keep the time fairly tight, so I was keenly aware of the fact that this was going to be a very quick, brutal competition. So, and I knew that Morris was going to be there. He was supposed to be there. So I ended up getting the best shape of my life, and he didn't compete, which is a bummer. But I ended up losing to Travis anyways, which is the irony, is I was like, I'm not going to win that competition. Then Fortissimus was 5 or 6 days later. And I'm like, I would even train for Fortissimus, and I ended up winning that one, and it just goes to show you how the body just, I had done too much, and I kind of was overtrained, and Travis was just on fire. But once I took that week off, my body just, over accommodated, and I came in Fortissimus just in very good shape, conditioning wise.
Talk about that contest, because that was going to be I was going to lead you there next. So that contest was like that. You did some things there that just completely shattered what people thought was possible in the strongman world. That stone that you lifted, you were the only guy to lift it,
Yeah, John, I, like I was saying, I was training for Madison Square Garden in 2008, and that was going to be sort of Marius was going to come to the United States and beat me, because I'd beat him earlier in the year at Mohegan Sun. And, I wasn't going to let that happen, and it's close enough to my house. So I just trained like just an absolute monster. And, I was a little too motivated. I mean, I'm not going to take anything away from Travis. Travis came in an insane shape. I was so focused on the conditioning and stuff. I was crushing the events. But like the stone load and some of the higher skill stuff, I just was bobbling stuff, where Travis wasn't in as good of shape, but Travis just does work. He does work really, really well. And he just came in, and just no mistakes, where, if the competition went for 2 days, I would be, I'd have a hard time having it, understanding how anyone would be able to beat me, because the next day is when, John is insane. You're sore, you're beat up.
Oh, yeah.
But then Fortissimus, I just didn't even, there was so much, I'm like, I'm not going to train really for it. It's just kind of a gimmicky thing, at that time. I'm not, and that's no disrespect. I was like, there's just no way I could train all this stuff. So when I just took 5 days off from the gym, my body just recovered, and I actually ended up having my wisdom tooth had impacted, and I had a little abscess. The side of my face was swollen. I had to go to the doctor the morning of the competition. I was on antibiotics, but because I'd already lost Madison Square Garden, because I hadn't really anticipated preparing for the event, my tooth was killing me. I just had this sort of reckless abandon. Like, I just really didn't give a shit. I just want to go out there and just have as much fun as possible. And next thing you know, it's me and Zadrunas are number 1 and 2. And then next thing you know, like, I'm in first. I'm like, holy shit, like that's not supposed to happen, and yeah, and going into last event,
how big was that stone? It was 500 some pounds, wasn't it?
535.
Yeah,
535.
Yeah, somewhere thereabouts. And
monster.
They said it was like they said it was going to be 517, and at that time, John will know, when me, John, Travis, Brian, when we would go overseas and compete, the natural stones were very, very popular, and
big time.
We as a group, we were actually I think we were ahead of the curve with the Americans and most guys. And I don't even know, I don't think anyone's really trained natural stones that much. It's just that we just had so much fun. Like, I don't know, it just.
When you look at it, you got to try to figure out where's the best place to grab it. How do you position it before it's your turn? There's so much, a lot of thinking and figuring out how to pick that thing up. They're all different.
Well, and, if you were to put me, Nick, and if you go back to that time period, it's funny because if you were to put me, John, I'm going to talk about the natural stone learning for a second. Me, John, Brian, and Travis in a room, and then Tom McClure was the year after. You wouldn't think like these are cerebral athletes, right? You would think like these are a bunch of, knuckle dragging, like I mean, Brian was a gorilla, just this big, looks like, cross between a sumo wrestler and a basketball player. He wasn't heavy. He just was big dude, not like he is now. He's just insane amount of muscle. And then you had Travis, who just was like this animal,
nuts.
You're like
just straight nuts.
And then you're just, coughing, spitting, saying, like, I'm like, oh my God, it's like having your like senile uncle around, because you're just like saying like the worst shit ever. I'm like, oh my God, like, I remember like you're showering in the room and you like open the curtain and you're like, look at my alveoli or whatever in my throat, and I'm like, you're naked. Like, it's swollen from snoring. I'm like, oh my God. You're just like, but all of us as a whole, I look at us and I'm like, well, the conversations we'd have, and I'm going back to that World's Strongest Nation type group that we had, very cerebral. Then you have Van Hatfield in there, and you have Tom McClure, who were just like the chaperones almost, because it was just chaos. I mean, it was just absolute, totally. Like, oh my God. I mean, guys now, like,
conscious. They were the ones that had the conscious of the group,
Oh my God. I remember going out with Tommy Latta after World's Strongest Nation that one year, and I think it was I thought I was going to die. Oh, yeah. Like, their food was terrible. It was, we're in Ukraine, and Tommy's like feeding me like glasses of vodka, and I'm like, I'm thirsty, thanks, and I drink it. Yeah. I'm like, wow, that's not water. Oh my God, and that's one thing I miss about the sport, John and Nick. We all were in that era where, man, you show up to a competition, man, like, you might go missing. Like, there was some crazy, man, it was like, you were like a rock star, but not really, you know what I'm saying? Like, you weren't really, it's weird. It just was like the dudes were like bikers and some gangbangers back then, like it was, and I say that and people probably have no idea what I'm talking about, but you two know what I'm talking about, the Eastern European, like, dudes got holes in them and stuff. They go up to your room with a fanny pack and they're like trying to sell you stuff. You're like, what is it? What's going on?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh man.
There'd always be some guy that would pull into the hotel and he'd be there for the whole time, the whole week. In the back of his truck, or his trunk would be filled with God knows whatever you wanted was in the back of that car, you know.
Oh man. And then like there'd be like I remember in Ukraine we went out to like the strip club one year. I think it was before you guys got there. Me and I befriended some Marines, you know. I got the clean cut look, right? So all the guys like gravitate towards me. And we go like the strip club and it turns out like all the Marine guys are engaged to all the strippers. Oh my God. And I remember they like bought me a lap dance. This is like the debauchery of this era, you know? And the girl I remember was this beautiful Ukrainian girl. And she's like doing her dance. And I'm like, it was like it was like first time at a strip club ever. I'm like 25 years old. You know, you remember me back then. I was
oh man, you're so naive, man. Just a kid.
Oh my God, you know, like so just not worldly in that sense, you know. And in the stripper, you know, sense, you know. But so I remember I'm like sitting there and like sitting on my hands. I'm like, don't want to touch her, you know, like. And she's like, everything okay? And I'm like, no, it's fine. It's fine. She's like, you no touch. I'm like, no, I'm not touching. She's like, no, you no touch, no good. I'm like, no. She's like, no, you touch. I'm what? It's a little different than back home, I guess. You know, it's just, you know, but that was like that era. Like I grew up, you know, in strongman. You know, I was a young guy. I was a cop at that point, you know, already. I've been a cop since I was 22. But you know, it just was. It was like you never knew what you're gonna get, man. I would go to work, you know, work midnights, get off work, fly out to God knows where, compete for a weekend, fly back, in 2 to 3 hours I got to be back at work, you know. And it was like I felt like a double agent, you know, like it just was like, you know, it was just craziness. Yeah. It was like you didn't do it because you wanted money, fame, or fortune, man, and you just did it because it was just badass, you know. You just loved this pursuit of just strength, but not like we're talking like warrior strength, you know. And I think about you guys, you know, and man, it just a different era. Now it's pretty, you know, as you got the strong, is that the shirt wearing strong and pretty shirt? Is that what it is? You know, but now it's, you know, the sport, everyone's, you know, it's all about the look of it, you know. Back then, man, it was like, you know, you would see the event on paper and you're like, these guys did what? You know, like the shit that, you know, loved it, you know. I don't, it's not that I don't love it now. I mean, I love it, but that's just, I grew up in a sport when it was just chaos. And I use Tommy Lotta as an example. Like that dude would like, he'd go out for like days. You're like, he's competing, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, you'd go out after a contest was over, and you really wouldn't go back to the hotel except for to grab your bags and get, you know, go catch a flight, you know.
With 4 connecting flights from Ukraine to New York. Like, been traveling for like 30 hours, you know.
There was one of those. Remember, there was one of these flights coming out of somewhere, and they went to go take off, and son of a bitch wouldn't get off the ground, so they shut it down. Remember that? Yeah. And they had to take the baggage off the fucking plane to get us off the ground. We're sitting there, you and I and Americans, we're just shitting our pants going, what the fuck? The Europeans are like, oh, they just got to take the bags off.
I remember, and I tell that story, and people think I'm full of shit, you know, like the guy needed a second running start to take the plane off because there's like 20 Eastern European dudes, like, you know, we're talking like back then, everyone was like, you know, me and John and Travis were like kind of smaller guys.
Yeah, we were kind of looked at like the small American group compared to these fucking monsters over there.
Yeah, you had
humongous.
Oh, you had Z at 400 pounds. You had Khalil at, you know, almost 400 pounds. You had Fasil Verstook with, you know, the bullet holes in them, you know, 370. You know, all these guys, not only were they strong, but like you were like, you look and you're like, I think if I say the wrong thing, they might murder me, like.
Yeah. Vasile is scary, man. Vasile was really scary.
Yeah.
Nicest guy. Nicest freaking dude. But man, was he kind of scary looking.
Yeah. And he talked scary too, like he had that look on his face. You're like, I don't know if he's mad. I don't know what's going on here.
You didn't see a lot of smiles out of him,
Yeah, and then you had Vitas Plakaitis too. Remember him? Like the guy would just constantly like run into you and like sweaty, hairy mess.
Oh, remember the thing with Vitas is, man, he had the smell down cold, man. He smelled like a farm animal, and it was always that way, no matter he was fresh out of the shower or not.
the hairiest strongman ever.
Yes.
literally the hairiest strongman ever. Not on his head, but everywhere else.
But strong, a level of strength that
still is.
And that, I don't know, I think if he just didn't look like the Wicked Witch from the West, with his nose and stuff, the guy would be more, would be, you'd see him out there a little more. The guy, gotta be one of the top 5 strongest guys in that era, every single competition. He was just unbeatable. Like, his max output was high, but his work capacity too. I'm like, what? I'd see the shit he's eating. I'm like, how is that? He's like drinking Coke, and like, putting God knows what in his mouth. I'm like, what is that? And he's, and
thing too, the purses at these things, as we know, were not very big, but for some of these countries, those guys were making fucking bank if they came in and won a contest, That was some of those payouts. Obviously, as Americans, they were nothing special, but for some of these guys in countries where they didn't have much, that was big,
Yeah, and that just goes to show you. I remember like $2,000 to $5,000 was the average sort of first, second place, somewhere thereabouts.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like woohoo, yeah, I won. I win a competition, and then like sometimes we wouldn't get the check for a bit of time, And I'm like, oh, as a surprise, because I never really cared about the money, I'm sorry. No, they would give me the envelope, and I had no idea what was in the envelope until I got home. I'm like going through customs, like, you have any cash on you? No. I'm unpacking my bag, and I'm thinking it's like a thank you card. I'm kidding, but I'm not, because you remember that, John. That era, I was like, just like super. I'm expecting a W-2, a check, a 1099 at the end of the year, Nope, just an envelope stuffed with a couple grand cash, and I'm like, oh, I wondered if that was an accident, and then I obviously I learned. It was just it's
shifting gears, brother. Speaking of money, when you really started taking a hold of stuff, and you were. Number one, you were spectacular in competition, but you looked, you had a look that nobody else had. And so you actually kind of were one of the people that really started the monetization in terms of guys coming along and making money. You were learning to, obviously you're winning contests. You were starting to do well with some sponsorships like MHP, but then you were also really learning how to leverage yourself. You were one of the first guys that started to leverage yourself a little bit. You did well with that. Talk to us a little bit about that. You got a pretty good business mind for that era in the sport.
Well, I saw guys like you going out and going from strongman, and I saw you were obviously sponsored by MHP, and I think you still are at that time, and so I saw you sort of going after sponsorships, and I was like, well, and I knew Gerard Denty from, I forget how I met him, the owner of MHP at that time. I think he still owns it. Awesome guy. So I knew that there was, but I guess, I kind of learned a lot from you, actually, John. I saw you're, into property management and into investments, and which that's stuff I never really had a mind for, that sort of stuff. But I did see that you put a value on you, and I just didn't want to do stuff for free, but it wasn't about money for me. I had a good job. I still have a good job. So I think my mindset was a little, I wanted all of us to get like recognition. It wasn't about like, oh, I'm better than everybody else. I just knew that if I can get in front of somebody that, and I hired an agent, and he was really successful at sort of furthering my cause, but getting on the cover of Muscle and Fitness.
Yeah, that was
getting
huge.
It was awesome. And those guys, we started putting articles together and started making it like a regular thing. And one of the other things that we did is I was able to get a radio show on satellite radio, which was awesome. It wasn't about strongmen. It was about kind of like what we're talking about now a little bit, about life and about like, perspective and, just trying to be the best you, right?
Yep.
And I really enjoyed it. And that was kind of more in my wheelhouse. I just, the strength stuff was awesome, but I think people can relate to just trying to, have fun with life, man. We all have an expiration date, and I think that was one of the things that I found to be, I wasn't trying necessarily to monetize it. That was cool.
Kind of a positive side effect of what you were doing, really.
Yeah, but when people would see the stuff that we would do, I remember doing Madison Square Garden, doing some publicity stuff. People ate it up, like rolling frying pans in half and ripping phone books, or rolling frying pans, ripping phone books and stuff. And I'm like, really? That's impressive. You should see, then we started pulling buses and, doing all that sort of stuff for promotional stuff. And the more people saw, like, they were super intrigued by it. And it wasn't just like, this dumb jock, this big, gorilla. I think they really learned that when they would see that we're all introspective, right? And we all, I'm sure your listeners will get to know you and Nick pretty well. You guys have come from a really cool spot mentally, and everybody I've ever met in the sport, guys like Travis, guys like Brian, my former training partner, Tom McClure. The list goes on. Guys that just you can learn a lot about life, from you guys. And when we would do this sort of media stuff, people always commented on that. So I think that was important for me to make sure that I represent the sport, but I also got people to see that side of us. So I guess that's really, something.
Well, I remember you were somewhere along, I can't remember when it was, but we were talking and you had started to use PayPal, and it was obviously a way of receiving money for some sort of a service or an appearance. And I thought, oh man, he's on it now, Yeah. Because PayPal was like the first way that now there's 10 different ways of money exchange now, but PayPal was like the original,
I still use PayPal,
Yeah.
I remember, I got in PayPal back when PayPal was linked with eBay, early 2000s. That's like, so like, that's like Elon Musk era when I think he started PayPal, if I recall. But so, that was, it's weird because at that time I didn't realize it, but it definitely was sort of breaking new ground. But now I'm like the complete opposite. I'm like a dinosaur. I don't really do content. I don't really do, it's kind of weird. I went from one extreme to the other. I pretty much stayed, keep to myself, and it's just different. I don't know. And I don't know why that is. It's just, I'm over it, I guess. I don't know.
Well, everybody evolves, you're in a certain part of your life, you're going to be the best version of you as Derek Poundstone, the strongman. Obviously you're retired. It's time to be the best version of you in what you do next. Obviously you're a parent now. There's life changes a lot, in a short period of time once kids enter the equation,
Yeah, John. And I remember Nick, I'd seen him, bring his kids up in the sport, and I would have loved to do that, but I just had him later on in life, and it wasn't really, mind you, Nick had his kids, Nick is still, the guys, I don't know how you compete at 50, but the point I'm getting at though is
54, I believe, isn't it?
53. Don't rush it.
53. Excuse me.
Don't rush it.
But I think for me that the passion had decreased, but I found, being a parent was like that. Like I'm all or nothing, and that was like that helped. I don't want to say fill a void, but it just really helped me learn a lot about myself. And then the next level for me was coaching guys. Like that is, I used to see guys like coaching guys. I'm like, oh, okay, that's definitely nothing I'm ever going to do, because it's like they're going out there and like it just, to me, it just seems so foreign, to help a guy. But like, how do you benefit from it? I mean, and that sounds shallow, but I didn't really grasp it as a 20-something-year-old guy. It wasn't until Rob Kearney had asked me a few times to coach him, and I'm like, nah, man, that's not my deal, And I had coached some guys here or there, but it was like different. I'd just done some like programming for one-off stuff. But to really, take on a guy's training to that level, and like, because programming it for a guy is different than coaching a guy, right? Like coaching is like, it's also the psychological element, like, when they have a bad lift, you got to be able to pick up the pieces, and be like, hey man, you got to be able to explain it, why it happened. And then you got to be able to fix it, and that takes a lot of experience. And,
problem solving comes with experience for sure,
Yeah, and that's where I learned that was maybe the next level. I learned that was guys like would listen, and would take what I was saying as gospel. And I was like, wow. And then they'd say, well, my deadlifting sucked today, and they'd send a video, and I'd be like, okay, or I recently had a guy who his deadlift, it was on this rise. It just, I'm not gonna go into the details, but basically he just stalled, and in like 1 week it just felt too heavy, and I'm like, he hit that point where the body just 3-4 weeks, the body does not want to adapt anymore, and that's why the conjugated method's pretty popular. Is you kind of just changing just enough that the body keeps on adapting and becoming better. So, the answer isn't like, he's like, do we deload? I'm like, fuck no. We don't, we have to do something that we've never done before. Right. So he went to the gym the very next day and deadlifted again, and it wasn't because he needed rest. He just, his training had become predictable. And he's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, man. But he did his chest workout and then pulled his 90% deadlifts for some doubles, and that's the type of stuff that he's like, it went from being where he would have had a terrible week, because he would have just, he was competing, 2 weeks after that, but instead of having a terrible week and just festering on it, we just, boom, next day, deadlifted again, changed the numbers a little bit, and he hit the number that he failed. And then he also did some benching and some upper back stuff. And so he turned it into a win, and that's the part that I really enjoy, is like that secret sauce, that stuff that I've learned along the way.
No, brother, I totally agree. I mean, that's something I do, primarily, nutrition coaching. Of course, I do training for people that want, but the nutrition is really my specialty. And there's a huge reward when you help someone do something they didn't think they could do. It's a different type of, obviously it's rewarding when you do something that you didn't think you could do, but when you help somebody else, it's a whole different type of value system. It feels good, so for you to move on to that next step of coaching, I'm sure probably was really satisfying,
Yeah. I mean, I remember going down to Worlds with Rob in 2019, and, just sort of helping him out at the events. And man, that was, I mean, if you remember that year at all, they had that crazy yoke medley, and I was going up to Massachusetts, and I'd bring a bunch of stuff up there, and we'd do like truck pulls and some, really tough strongman days up there. But they had this like 1,200 pound yoke. And I was like, yeah, we can't train that, Rob. It's just gonna be too much on your body, So we just trained, right around 1,000 pounds or so. And of course, Rob goes in and wins the event. And we had spent so much time, and that's one of several events he did very well at. we'd spend, looking at all like the little nuances of the lifts. And that's what I really enjoy. And that's going back to the Fortissimus conversation before, analyzing that big stone and realizing that to row a 537-pound stone, into your lap is, that's, at the time I was 305 pounds. There's no way, but I can leverage it up.
That was a very odd shaped stone too. That was just for people that never seen a picture of you lifting that. If you look at a picture of you lifting that, you think, how in the hell is he going to get this into his lap just by looking at the shape of it?
Yeah, that was pretty brutal.
Yeah, and that's it. I looked at it and kind of in my mind I was able to think, okay, well, this is how I'm gonna lift it, and and that was the same thing, and the same thing that happened in 2020 at the Arnold. Rob and I were looking at that crazy medley, which I think he took first or second in that as well. The loading carry, Husafeld stone loading medley. We were looking at every single thing piece by piece and realizing that when he's getting gassed, he's, he could do some trickery as far as how he held some stuff early on. But then as he got exhausted, we knew that the fine motor skills would go. So, his technique had to change based on how they decided to put the implements in there, and it was awesome. I love that. I love that level of just planning and preparation, and then seeing a guy just have faith in you. Like, it's just awesome. Something that to me it's like when it's like a Sherpa, right? Like you hire a Sherpa to go climb the biggest mountain in the world. I mean, you don't have the Sherpa, you're gonna die. I mean, there's no question asked. Just having some guy with you, like it just makes all the difference. Like how even if they don't help you carry your shit up, right? Like, but just the guidance, knowing that this guy's been up there before. He's like, hey, it's gonna suck. You might get a little delirious, but just do what I do and do what I say, and you'll be fine. And that's what I like. It's like that mentality.
Well, brother, we touched on this earlier, but I think for the viewers that maybe don't understand just what a savage you are, talk to us about some of the injuries that you had. But it's not just that you had these injuries, is that you not only trained through many, but you competed. Like, you tore a quad very, very short period of time before World's Strongest Man and still went and competed. Talk to us about some of these crazy injuries that you've had and actually competed through, because it's one thing to train through an injury. It's another thing to go compete on a major. And you had a lot of them. Your back, that quad. I mean, you talk to us.
Yeah, John, my first sort of major injury was in 2006. I had ruptured the disc in my lower back, and it caused like a slight hemorrhage on my spine, which I still suffer with today. Now, unfortunately, that ruptured disc, and then also I had a herniated one above it, turned into, now I've got a total of 5 bad discs, and a fractured vertebrae. And that's a byproduct of obviously the beating I put myself, the beating I just took and put myself through for the last couple decades. But I mean, I won America's Strongest Man about 6 months after being told I wouldn't be able to lift anything heavy ever again. And I deadlifted 805 pounds at America's Strongest Man 2007, which was what I ruptured my disc with, deadlifting 805 pounds, and and it wasn't poor technique. I was taking, at that time, I had upper respiratory infection. I was taking, I forget there was a big class action suit for the antibiotic. I forget what it was at that time, but a lot of guys were tearing their bicep. Same sort of material. The disc and the bicep tendons are made out of similar material, but it weakened it, and that more than likely, I feel like probably had some sort of exacerbating effect. But so and then back in 2010, 3 weeks before World's Strongest Man, I was doing a ton of volume, and lots of we were talking about lots of squats, and I use squats as a way to sort of increase my work capacity. Just like you, John, I wasn't like I didn't really care about depth. I just want to get the 8, 9, 10 reps, and I was in the 600-pound range. And The last set of squats that I was going to do, because I was going to become more specific in the training, right? About 3 weeks prior, I start dropping all the accessory stuff and I become, I'll start doing like bottom up squats or car squats to make it more specific. But leading up to that, I'm going to do, work capacity type stuff, with the straight bar. And so I get the strength increase, but I also get the increased recovery and the work capacity and that sort of stuff. So last set of any barbell squat I was doing in my World's Strongest Man prep, and last rep of the last set, I tear my quad, vastus lateralis. And it just was like I had done so much volume in the preceding weeks, just got a cramp mid squat, and when you're pushing up and the muscle cramps, that part of the quad it's holding all the weight. It created not too bad of a muscle tear, but man, it bruised like I've never seen before. My leg was swollen, my toes, bottom of my toes were black and blue.
I remember that.
Yeah, and I was going to drop out.
Yeah, I remember that too, and you didn't, and then you still made the finals.
Yeah.
Real quick, before I start to interrupt, for anybody that didn't hear Derek start the story, 3 weeks before World's Strongest Man was when this injury happened. 21 days, he tears a quad and still ends up competing for rehabbing and competing with basically, as we all know, torn quad's not fixed in 3 weeks.
Well, yeah, and I had actually called Nick, and I was like, yeah, man, I'm done. I can't, I'm dropping out. And he's like, maybe just give it a minute, just go there and have fun. I'm like, no, I'm not going to go there and just be a dead weight, And he's like, well, just give it some time. Don't make the decision yet. So I tell the guys at World's Strongest Man that I was injured, but I wasn't sure. I was undecided, And then I just stopped training. Well, I didn't stop training. I just did curls every single day. And if anyone's ever seen World's Strongest Man 2010, it was very, very clear that I looked like a pro bodybuilder. That's all I could do was I couldn't really bench because I couldn't lay down. It stretched my quad too much. So I just benched. I just did some light overhead pressing and curled every single day. And I like a week out, I end up, and there's more to the story that I don't think John is realizing. But a week out, I think I'm gonna be fine. And I started doing some treadmill, walking on the treadmill and stuff, and some light training, and ended up taking 9th in World's Strongest Man that year. But after I took 9th, I had dropped out of America's Strongest Man, and on the flight over because I still had the flights to America's Strongest Man, I decided that I was going to compete.
This was going to be the second half of what I was going to say, is that you basically took a plane inside of 24 hours, went and won America's Strongest Man. We're talking 3 weeks prior to World's Strongest Man, tore a quad, couldn't even lay down, placed 9th, and then take a plane home, not recovered. I mean, Nick, how hard would that be to compete at all?
So at World's Strongest Man, there's 12 events. Remember, he's got the qualifying heats. So we had 6 events, and then he had the finals. So he did another 6 events, and then takes a plane flight, and then goes and wins America's Strongest Man. So he was that good, though. He was literally that good. And the ability Derek has to push himself through pain, there's only a handful of guys I've ever seen with that kind of ability. Derek's one of them. Travis Ortmeyer's the other one. And they can push themselves far past what any human being I've ever seen can push themselves through in pain and still function. And it's just amazing, and it's unheard of for the things that he's done. So people just don't do it.
No, I totally agree. I mean, if you think about that, you're talking tearing a quad, you can barely walk, you can't lay down. You basically have 2 contests inside of World's Strongest Man, which you're going to be completely destroyed from. Most people are taking a fair amount of time off. He goes on a plane, which doesn't help you recover.
And dehydrates you.
Now, when I said this guy when I introduced you, brother, I said you're a savage. This is a very, very, this is like a 4-week window, 5-week window into just how much of a fucking savage you are, brother. I mean, most people they wouldn't even consider what you actually did.
Well, no brain, no pain, John. Just don't think about it. No, I mean,
Well,
I like the challenge. And, if you would have told me, if I thought about that, going into it, there's no way I wouldn't be able to even, think about it. But, I just took it one step at a time. And I said, well, let me just go over to World's Strongest Man, just try it out. And then it turns into like, I'm all right. I ended up deadlifting. I ended up winning my deadlifting in my heat and doing pretty well. Just straight, stiff leg deadlifting it. And because I was recovering my everywhere else was recovered. You
had the power stairs that year too.
Yeah,
and those things were 500 pounds, and the steps were like 20 inches.
There's a picture. That's that fucking picture. He looks like, where the fuck did the fucking bodybuilder show up from? So fucking jacked. I mean, brother, there's a picture of you taking those power stairs up, and you can see it on the front. It says like 225 kilograms, and your arms are bigger than your legs or your head. Hence, now we know why, all the curls you did leading into it.
That's all I can do, and I couldn't work clearly, so I wasn't gonna sit around the house. I just would go to the gym and just curl, and there's like another level of sort of just shittiness that happened that going into Worlds was, America's was I told Dion that I was going to compete, and the president of ASC, and she was promoting the show obviously, and she's like, "Are you sure, Nick, you were there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why not?" She's like, "You could just judge," and I was like, "Nah, I'll just go there," and and I get off the flight, and I couldn't even check in the hotel. We went right over to. They were like, and then I get there, they're like waiting for me. I was like, "Oh shit!" I felt like bad, That was my first time competing against Mike Jenkins, and I got to tell you, the interesting thing was I was good that day, but one of the reasons I was so good, I think, was because Mike was there. I'm like, this guy, I don't know. A lot of guys are talking about him, but let's just see, and then he starts doing well. I'm like, oh shit, this guy's good. So like I had to turn it on, and I had to play like all like no big deal. No, I couldn't lose, because it just, to me, it was like I was playing it like cool guy, like I basically, my behaviors and my actions had wrote a check that, that I had to now cash, right? And I'm like, uh-oh, like I can't be like, no big deal. Yeah. And Mike's like, oh, and he was like, and Mike, in his mind, I could just tell by look on his face, was like, this guy's got no idea what I'm capable of. And on my mind, I'm like, this guy's got no idea what I'm capable of. And it was like this, this battle without saying a word. It was like this psychological chess. If anyone's watched Pumping Iron, it was kind of like that,
Yeah.
And Mike brought me to a whole nother level that day. And, I am better for it, because I learned how hard I can push my body. I mean, we had yoke walk, torn quad, terrible. Oh my God, it was painful.
Oh my God.
I hit a 420-pound log press at the competition, no leg drive, because, it was just like, I was like a man possessed, because, it was a fight. And sometimes, if you watch MMA, there's those certain matches, and it's like BJ Penn with Matt Hughes, they bring out the best in each other, right? BJ Penn fights other guys, he's good, but man, when he fought Matt Hughes, man, he was a whole nother level. Same thing with Matt Hughes, and that was like Mike. And the other person that brings out the best by far is Travis. And I say best, like it's like psychological warfare, because my actions are what does the talking. And like, I'm going to show him, and he's the same way. He's like, I'm going to show him. And man, we would compete in that generation, John, and Nick, you were there. It was like a shit show. It was like insanity. you know.
I remember some guy telling me if I can just stay close to him in the tire flip, you know, I'll be okay on this event. Just stay close to me.
Well,
who was that? That was me.
If you remember that, huh?
That was me.
That was you. 2006 at America's Strongest Man when we did the tire
Yes.
flip.
Such an asshole.
You were like,
just stay
if you can
close.
stay by me, you're gonna get a time with this.
Oh God, that sounds like an arrogant fuck. But I mean, I knew that at that time. I knew I was going to be pretty decent. So I guess.
Well, that was always the thing. I remember way back when we're talking about, you know, being in Europe. I remember that about you, brother. Once the first event hit, it was a fight. You were going to fight it out to the end. You're like a pit bull. You're either going to die or you're going to fight to the end.
Yep.
So you're going to die or you're going to fucking win, and that's it. I mean, pain or not, you don't register the pain. You just start fighting, and everything else goes away. You know.
Remember the John? I mean, there's two things I think that stand on my mind that really took me to a whole nother level: the pole push in Ukraine and the tug of war.
My God.
Oh, geez.
Those were brutal.
John got hurt.
It was like no time limit. It was like you had to win or lose, and these things were going on for minutes. You know, brutal.
Yeah, you got hurt, so I was sitting in every single round.
Yeah. Well, you know, speaking of which, that trip when I got hurt, so we were on a beach. It was wrestling, strongman wrestling, and I busted up my ACL, and I couldn't get out to the medics, so they had me on a stretcher. And you were behind me where my head was, so that because you were afraid someone was going to drop me. I'm like, dude, save your fucking grip. There's a lot more. And you were like, no, I'm going to make sure you're okay. I mean, that was like, at that time, it was so endearing because I was hurt. You know, when you get hurt, you're just you're just in a whole different world. And the fact that you just stuck by my side to make sure I got to the medic, to the van or whatever they were putting me in to take me to the hospital, that you carried. I kept telling you, no, save your grip. There's a lot more. And you were like, no, I'm going to carry you through. I remember that sits in a deep spot in my heart, brother. I thank you for that.
Well, listen, not for nothing, but you're not a small guy, so you'd still be there today if you like laying on the beach still. Like that looked like a piece of leather. You were stuck there. There's no way. Let's say use a tractor or something.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, I mean, I looked up to you guys, like you and Van Hatfield were much older than me, and I just then Nick too. I mean, I remember Nick was always like, we'd be battling it out, and I'd be going against him on an event, and he'd be like giving me in the early part of my career, giving me advice or giving me like, it's cool because he would say stuff like, I know you're going to beat me on this event. It'd be like deadlift, something that I'm Nick is a deadlift freak, and he'd be like, hey, just don't beat me by too much. I'm like, look at him like, really? I mean, you're like a power lifter, like on a whole nother level. This is going back early days, 2006, 2007, and always just willing to give like a cheerleader. And same thing with you, John. That's one thing that stuck by me is same with Van. I remember Van was just, like giving me like tips for like pressing. And it was like, these are guys that I'm competing against. And just like, like teaching me a little bit about the inner game, like just understanding like, I want you I want to beat you, but I want to beat you with, you at full potential.
At your best. Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And for people that don't know, strongman is a brotherhood in a really, really deep way. I mean, the guys that you compete with, whether you're on the same team or you're competing against them, we all go through the same shit, and it's so we all support each other. Even when you're pissed off that you didn't do well, you're happy that somebody else did do well. And that's a really cool thing about the sport. That was something I really, really missed when I left.
Yeah, and that's where I think the coaching for me fills that void a little bit, because it's like to see somebody that you're helping and just for them to listen to you and when you say, hey, listen, you got this, you'll be all right. It's that same sort of thing, but instead of, it's no longer like it's you still have that brotherhood, but now it's like, all the things that I went through in my career, like now it has depth and weight, it has value, something that's a little more tangible, because all those memories, I mean, they're memories. Like we could talk about them and people can, your listeners can hear them, but then to use that to cause action, right? Like it gives it weight, it gives it something that's measurable, if you will.
Yeah. Well, check this out, brother. When we were like, sometimes we'd be, on a flight or sitting in an airport, and obviously this time you'd only been a cop for a few years, but we used to have some fun with you telling some crazy cop stories. So tell us a couple of crazy cop stories now. You've had another 15 years of being a cop since you told me a cop story. Let's hear some crazy cop stories.
Yeah. Well, those are nothing. I've been 18 years, long time. I'm a lieutenant now. So I'm not on the road that much. But I remember one of the there's a couple stories. One of the most interesting stories was, it was like New Year's, a decade or so ago. And I was working midnight patrol, and, one of our old paramedics, he was a retired like combat medic, he's since passed to cancer. He's the type of guy who would never wear gloves. He's like the guy that he was going to save your life and then, be damned if whatever, he was cool. He calls me on my cell. He's like, there's this chick that just came out of the store. She was like just hammered. He's like, man, she's like bad. She shouldn't be driving. So he gives me her description of her car, whatever. And I come up to, I'm driving towards a gas station. She leaves before I can, intervene, and I turn around and she's like all over the road. Now, once she leaves, I can't be like, hey, I just wanted to tell her, hey, don't drive, lock her keys in the car. This is going back. This is a different time,
Yeah.
Like, you just lock the keys in the car, like, oh, hey, sorry, they wouldn't complain about that, right? Because you're preventing them from getting in jail, getting arrested, So she's all over the road, and so I pull her over, and it's New Year's. I mean, whatever, but she's just obnoxious. So field sobriety test her, and she's clearly highly inebriated. It's like 4 a.m. It's not like 1 o'clock. It's like go home, go to bed. Night's over. And so one of his old timers comes up and he backs me up. Old timer, like, the guy had like paws for hands, Italian guy. And he's my backup. And I go to arrest her, and she like kicks me, like just misses my balls. Like because she's like donkey kicks me, like from like I got her hands, like, I'm holding her hands, like, so she's in front of me, and I got to push over the car because she's like fighting, and women fighting it. Like it's like you go in like half, 3/4 speed, man, whew, her heel just grazed my ball bag. You know what I'm saying? Like it was not my man purse, if you will. Right. It was, I was like, oh shit, So the other cop, like he's an old timer, he just sees that, super nice guy. He just like mushes her face onto the hood of the car, nothing like people have this. You say that 10 years ago, people are like, oh, now they're like, brutal. No, I almost got my a testicle impaled by her heel. You know what I'm saying? Like her high heel. Right? But they, but whatever. So he pushes her head onto the car. I cuff her. I get the cuffs on, put her in the back of the car. She like tries spitting on me, the whole nine. And I'm just like, this chick's crazy, But mind you, I put no hands on her, right? Like I just, I'm like the victim here, right? The other officers wanted like, had to like restrain her, and like all night she's like, motherfucker, I got a little dick, she's like being so mean. I'm like, I didn't even touch you, like, and I'm like, oh my god, it's like. It's so funny because a lot of guys like, I don't know how you can do that job, but I think John, you and Nick know my personality. And I think that's because I just, I care. Like
absolutely.
I can be an asshole if I got to, but ultimately, if you spend any time around me, like I like, I'm interested. Like, I talk a lot, but I like to listen, and I like to, learn. And I might be arresting somebody for something, but I'm also interested in what happened. Like, how do we get there?
Yeah.
And I might not be able to fix it, but at least, I hear it enough and I could say, hey, well, there's this pattern here. I'm no rocket scientist, but 15 people all deal with the same issues. Maybe you probably shouldn't be smoking crack, right? Or, maybe you probably shouldn't be sticking a needle in your arm, right? Like, not for nothing, but like it does kind of humanize kind of the stuff you see out there on TV, and even recently, I had some chick. She was just crazy. I can't be too specific because the case is in court now. I mean, she's my state's in court. She's applied to have the case not dropped, but it's called AR, accelerated rehabilitation. So basically, plead guilty and whatever. And they wanted me to testify, and I said, no, I don't. Whatever. I mean, my job isn't to. She basically, so she spit in my face is what the story is, and. But what ended up happening was I'd gone back into the holding area to fix our automated printing, fingerprint machine, and she's just being vile. And one of these new guys is trying to get her out of the booking cell into the holding cell, because she's got to be held because she's refusing to be processed. So we'll process her later. Point is, after like 15 minutes of listening to this animal behavior it's insane. I said, come on, man, let's just go back to so you can sit back there. We'll get you some food, water, and we'll just kind of revisit this in like an hour. Fuck you, you're not gonna do that, and I'm like, well, no, I mean, I am. it wasn't an option. I was just telling you how it's gonna go, like, but just like that, John. You guys know, it wasn't like I wasn't like being a dick, like high and tight copy. I was like, no, I mean, no, I wasn't and she just didn't like authority, or maybe the drugs that she was on. But I say, listen, I've been punched, kicked, hit, spit. Just don't do any of that because it does not work well for you. It will not. I got a wife, kids. I'm not going to get spit on. What's going to end up happening is you're going to get hurt, and I don't want that. So I bring her out of the cell, and I'm escorting her, and she's trying to spit on me. I could see her, like, man, let's come on. I mean, really? She's like, you're having my arm, and I'm like, no, listen, I'm trying to get you. I'm trying to get you in the cell. You're not going to spit. Mind you, this whole thing is recorded. I got body cameras. Like this transparency is at the high. Like, there's like, but people think like, well, I'm trying to spit on you, so you got to let me go. And like, so I'm holding her arm, and I'm just like, this chick's crazy. I get her in the cell. She turns around and spits right in my face. I'm like, oh, really? I mean, it's like, and I'm just like, what do you do? I mean, like, there's no reaction because the assault was immediate. It's an assault technically, right? It's done over with, and it's like, in my mind, it's just like, what drives people to like, just think that's okay. Now, mind you, and then later on, she like calmed down. And I'm like, let me just ask you a question, right? Like, imagine going out to the jungle and finding a lion and just going up to it and just flicking it right in the nutsack, right? Like, or imagine like just punching it right in the nose. Like, do you understand? I'm a 300-pound guy with all these tools on my belt, and you think it's because that I'm not going to do something like that's insane, and and that's when I realized, this career is not, I want to help people, but the problem is people just don't want to help themselves anymore. They don't want to, like, oh, you got me, now it's like, well, it's your fault that I'm an asshole. And that's sort of changed the way that I've looked at the job, because it's like, okay, so be it.
Crazy stuff, brother. Crazy stuff. Well, brother, we've had you on here for quite some time, and we want to thank you for your time. But before we go, I got one more question, because you've done so much, and ultimately, you've done so much, and you're already on a path of helping other people. When your time is done, what is it that Derek Poundstone? What is it you want Derek Poundstone to be remembered for?
Yeah, I don't know yet. I'll tell you when I figure it out.
I love the honesty there, brother.
No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm a big fan of like, human behavior and psychology, and I like studying religion, not like go, I mean, I'm spiritual and religious, but I like I'm just fascinated with what life has to offer. And one of the things that recently I was reading quite a bit on Taoism, and because I'm just fascinated by like these like trying to put stuff in a box, like trying to understand the way, like Stoicism was another, is we'll call it religion, but school of thought that, and it's not like, I just like to understand how we get to where we are now, because when you look back, it really, it can give you a better understanding of why we are the way we are as people, and it was really cool because, one of the cool things about Taoism is, it was never really meant to be, it can't really be put in a box, right? Like, because, the original architect of Lao Tzu, which isn't a real person, but that's another thing. So, but he said, like, I cannot write this down because that goes against the principles, right? Because it's going to forever change, right? And that's me, I guess, I really can't put, not because like I'm one thing or another, it's because I don't know, and the honesty is I'm constantly evolving. And I think that's like, I'm going to school full time, and I work, and I'm a father, and, and I don't do those things because I'm trying to be something. I do those things because I just, over the last couple decades as an adult, I'm trying to understand me and you, and like, and,
just discovery,
and that's it. And so if I try to say like who I am now, it's going to change. Right. And that's what I thought was kind of inspiring about Lao Tzu explaining about, Taoism and, Taoism, understanding that you can't write it down because it's going to change over the next 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. So
you're evolving too fast to know what's going to be left behind. I love it, brother. I love
Very
it.
much so.
Yeah.
So the question is in this frame of mind, what do you want to leave? What do you think?
There we go.
As of today, because it's going to change, so we can look back.
Yeah.
We're going to interview you 10 years from now.
That's it. Great.
We're going to do this again 10 years from now.
That's it.
Great amendment.
Dick, that's a great amendment to the question, brother.
So as of today,
what
do you think it is, bud?
Confused. No, I think what I am today is, I would say, a student of, because I've been around and I've done some stuff. I would say that I'm, right now I'm still more of a student. I'm still taking stuff in, even though I'm a coach too, but I'm a student of training and of life and of understanding people and relationships, but I think that where I'd like to be at some point is more like a teacher. And I say that not like to understand things to a level where I can now communicate them better. Right. So I kind of get like philosophy and art and life and all that sort of stuff, but I have a hard time expressing that. And that's one of the reasons I find school interesting, and why I desire to go to school full time is I want to be able to, kind of articulate my thoughts a little better. Not that I can't, but I think that exactly what you're saying, Nick, is when I say I don't really know, but I should be able to know. Like, it's just that it's complicated, right? It's my Facebook relationship status, it's like, it's complicated, right?
Because Derek, you're one of the most articulate people I've ever run into. When you go to describe something, you talk about it. You talk about it very well, and you're very articulate, especially in your training. You break it down much further. I'll give people answers, and I'll break stuff down to them, and you can break it down 3 levels further than what I broke it down to them with. So to hear you say you want to be more articulate is amazing, because I think you're one of probably the most intelligent strongmen that I've seen. Hands down. And just people in general, and a good-hearted person and a good soul that does want to help people. So I have the absolute utmost respect for you, and it's just really neat to hear that even you want to keep improving and keep changing and what's there. So it's kind of neat for people to see that, because that'll be a good thing for people to follow and to learn from. And it's kind of neat to see you and the things that you've done and still doing, and you want to continue to evolve. And that's really cool.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that means so much. And listen, I respect you guys, and I would say that my level of respect, is more adoration, because, I think for me, when I say articulate like who I am. I mean, ultimately, life imitates art, right? And so strongman was a big part of me, and it left a big hole when I left it. But why is that? Like, so why I want to be able to articulate like what it is that drives certain people to do certain things, both good and bad. And that's what I'm saying is, yeah, I can break down a lift in strongman, but what about being able to use, that same sort of thought process just for everything,
Yeah.
And because I don't want to be just a one trick pony, and I don't want to not be a one trick pony. I just trying to figure out, what kind of makes me and other people tick, because that's fascinating. It's like, I look at like people that are just like, I think it's like that, people like monks are like self-actualized. They're just happy with nothing, but they won't say, I don't know, like just to the point where you're good,
Yeah.
like, what I'm saying? Like that state of like, and I'm good, but I want to understand like what that means. I don't know. It's I maybe spend too much time sort of by myself sometimes thinking about stuff, but
no, not at all. Well, I'm going to tell you this.
No.
Even the monks are still looking for that.
Yeah.
Just so that you know.
I mean, brother, when you're by yourself, that's where you have true discovery, because when you're by yourself, you can eliminate distractions. You can really kind of focus on the parts of you that you want to understand more and continue your journey,
Yeah. But I was kidding, but yeah, all kidding aside, that's, I think it's fascinating to understand, like, that we all have the internal dialogue, but understanding, like, it's really hard to control that, John, right? Like, that. Yeah. I mean, like when you're doing your deep water stuff and you're like, you'd be lying if it's like, if you're like, oh, well, no, it's easy. No, like that when you're in there, like there's always that doubt, and you say, well, I'm just going to keep doing it. But then that voice that says, just quit. Right. And that's, I think the point is understanding and not trying to silence that voice, but to hear it to the point where I can understand it. Right. Because if somebody's like, psychologically is going through some crazy stuff, what's going to happen is you got to listen to them to understand where they're coming from, so I got to listen to that voice and say, well, why is that there?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm trying to is figure out is like, what is that dialogue? Like, what does it mean? And
yeah,
it's kind of I get a little deep about it because it's just, I'm just fascinated by it, because that's what made me a good strongman was I was able to, make my own self-talk, but also I was able to sort of take anything around me and turn it into something that motivated me. But why though? That's the point is why does it have to motivate me? And why does it motivate me? And should it motivate me? Those are the things I think about. And I think that, it's that's what we're here for, right? Is to adapt and move forward.
Well, brother, being in a constant state of discovery is a pretty good place to be, because when you stop trying to discover who you are, you really, it's your existence really comes, it's a whole different place when you're constantly pushing and learning and digging and in whatever facet of your life. That's what life's all about, So I think it's I love to hear you talk like that, because, you're when I say rich, you're deep, you're an enriched human being, and your thought process, your emotions, all this stuff. And I think it's great, especially for, people that look at guys like us that are, meatheads and think that there's nothing more to it than barbells. It's
that is most of it, but I think that's where it starts though, right?
Yeah.
Is I think working out is for me and competing has made me a better person. I think it's,
yes.
I mean, as both you guys I'm sure can attest to is, that pursuit of strength, changes you forever. I mean, for the good.
And if you think about it, the pursuit of strength, when it comes down to what we, in strength world, people think physical, but in actuality, it's really mental.
Oh, it's all mental. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, the strength, is a physical representation of
Yes.
the drive, the thought process, and that's what I think is fascinating. And I mean, I look at guys like Elon Musk. I mean, he has mental strength like that far exceeds right. You know what I'm saying? He's
in a league of his own.
Yeah, and that's the stuff that is like, but what drives a guy like that? What, besides a touch of autism,
I love it.
But all kidding aside, though, but I mean, that's what I'm talking about is strength. It doesn't just mean physical strength, though. It's mental strength and fortitude, and that's like fortissimus, right? That's the ability to endure. That's to me is, and that takes mental strength, above all else.
Yeah. Well, brother, I got to tell you, all of our listeners are going to learn a ton from this episode because, you're really dropping some really cool stuff here because, there's so many dimensions to all of, a person, especially you, from the physical side to what we're talking about now. And this has been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and I'm sure guaranteed we're going to ask you to come on again because we just scratched the surface of Derek Poundstone. Christ.
Oh yeah, sure.
Block out 2 hours next time.
Well, more like 3.
Yeah. I love it.
Make it a trilogy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was great having you on, brother. Thank you so much for your time. And we'll definitely do it again sometime. And Nick, you have anything else for Derek before we close it up?
No, it's just an absolute pleasure to see you again, bud.
Yes.
And call. We need to talk more. We definitely need to talk more. So I miss the heck out of you.
Yeah, same here. Both you guys. It just reminds you that the relationships that sometimes we kind of let kind of get some moss on them. I mean, it's important to to stay in touch, and this was a blast, guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Thanks for stopping while you're driving. I know you're on your way to see your mom, so thanks for doing that. I appreciate it.
That's it. A busy guy pulled over on the side of the road to do the show. I feel very lucky. I know Nick does too, brother. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and we'll do it again sometime for sure. That's another edition of Legends of Iron, everyone. We will see you next time.
Legends of Iron is brought to you by Musclemensch, the creator of Nitro Test. Nitro Test is hands down the most fucking kick-ass pre-workout on the market.
If you fucking want some, come fucking get some.
Can you handle it?